Hey guys, this is Alyssa Pal and I'm here with Kenan Salazar, and today we're here to talk about perfect pitch. This is one of those things that always comes up when you're a musician. People ask about it, they get curious, and there are a lot of things about it that I'd like to clarify today here with Kenan and learn more from him about it. Kenan, I would love to hear a little bit about what you're up to in music and so on.
Sure, yeah. So as Alyssa mentioned, my name is Kenan Salazar. I'm a guitarist, music producer, founder of Kenan Salazar Music House. I played guitar in bands like Earth 7, and I've played with artists such as Scarlett Fiorella and all sorts of other people. And yeah, I'm here to talk about some perfect pitch. Yeah.
Thank you, Kenan. So my first question is, what is perfect pitch? What are we talking about? What does that mean when we say that? And then can you explain how is that different from relative pitch? I think those two are often used interchangeably.
Absolutely. So yeah, perfect pitch is sort of like, the more scientific term for perfect pitch would be absolute pitch. You might have heard that one kind of floating around, but perfect pitch, we'll just call it perfect pitch for now, because that's what everyone calls it. Perfect pitch is like the ability to distinguish, identify, or like reproduce a note like without a reference, just kind of straight up. Someone plays it and you're like, oh, that's an A, or oh, that's a C, or you're able to kind of say you have the guitar, someone plays a note and you can copy it instantly. Maybe not instantly, but you can copy it, right? You can copy it and without having like an exact reference of like, oh, I have to figure out what that note is based on this other note. You know what I mean? That would be relative pitch. Relative pitch is sort of, it goes hand in hand with absolute pitch or perfect pitch, but some people like to use them like as a dichotomy, where it's like either you have relative pitch or you have perfect pitch. It's not like one or the other. You can have perfect pitch and relative pitch. In fact, most musicians who have perfect pitch also have relative pitch, like myself, for example. But relative pitch is really just like you can identify a note based on a reference that they give you. Like someone plays a C and you know that's a C, but you have to find an F. So you're like, oh, I know that F is a fourth away. So you're like, you do the whole math in your head, right? That kind of thing. So yeah, that's the deal. That's what the deal is there. Okay. They don't contrast each other. I should make that pretty clear. A lot of people like to put that in like, you either have, as I mentioned before, they like contrast them, but they go hand in hand. And yeah, that pretty much sums up what perfect pitch is all about. Yeah.
Cool. So one thing I'm wondering as you say that is you're a guitar player, and so when you have perfect pitch, right? Yes. So that also means, like many others who have perfect pitch, you have relative pitch. And so when as a guitar player, are you able to sing a note like you know it, you hear it in your head, like, oh, like C, like boom, done, like you can sing it and you can play it? Or is it one extra step? Like, is it the knowledge of guitar that allows for you to say, oh, I know where C is, I can sing it for you right now, and I can also play it? How does that work?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not sure if like my guitar sort of proficiency really informs my like ability to identify a pitch. In fact, I would even say that I more hear a piano in my head when I think of like pitches and stuff, and I kind of visualize what a piano looks like. Even though that's not my main instrument, I kind of think of music theory and all that on a piano, not so much on the guitar, just because like on the guitar, it's a little, theory in general is a little obtuse on the guitar. It doesn't really lay out very cleanly like on a piano right over there, right? Mm-hmm. That is very clear, right? So when someone says to sing a C, right, I think it's more that like I've memorized what a C sounds like, which is this, right? Maybe not memorized, like I just kind of know that that's a C, mm-hmm. right? And so there's not really an extra layer for me, I would say. Mm-hmm. If anything, it's more like, as I mentioned before, it's more that I think of the piano if I have to think about it for a second, right? But most of the time it's right, instant recall. I'll just like, here's a C or here's an A, right? That kind of thing, right? Okay. Yeah, hopefully that does that make sense? Yeah, yes, that makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, and as you're saying that too, I'm remembering, I believe you mentioned once when you were talking about the guitar, and I think it was a teaching moment with a student, that I overheard you saying, "Oh, the guitar is actually like for piano. Like, can you remind me what you said? Because I was like, what? I don't know guitar as well as piano, so that was really interesting to hear how the relationship of the half steps. Like, can you remind me what that was?
Yeah, sure. So the guitar, I always like to call, like, it's like basically you're playing six pianos at once, because each string goes up the chromatic scale. Each string goes up one note. There's no white keys or no black keys. They're all just like going straight up. But you have six of those, like one after the other, and they're all tuned to different strings. So you kind of have to, if you're thinking about music theory in that way, you kind of have to almost like do some on the fly calculation as to like, oh, this string is this fret on this string is this one note. What would the note be if it was on that next string? Because, they're separate, they're different. They're different pianos, I like to call them, right? Yeah. So it's you have to kind of, you don't necessarily have to play the guitar, but if you're trying to understand music theory through the guitar, that's kind of the math that you have to do. Okay. If that makes sense. If it's like that six pianos thing that I was mentioning there, right?
Cool. Oh my gosh, so cool. So something that I wanted to ask you about is, were you born with it? Like, did you come out of the womb like here's a C or whatever it was, and that's right. Or were you? So wait, now that we say that, like, is it possible that you can? This is the same question. Like, can I develop relative pitch? Like, I feel like studying at Berkeley, like I was exposed to so much ear training that I was probably my sharpest at that time when I was surrounded by music 24/7. Whereas now, like, not so much, but like it's still in there. Like, if you work on it, can you get it? Can you get perfect pitch by working on it? Or do you have to just have that innate born skill?
Sure. So I would actually argue, I would actually argue personally, I'm not a believer in that perfect pitch is like a nature thing. I think it's a nurture thing. So I will say that I don't think that adults can get perfect pitch, but they can get what people call like pseudo absolute pitch in the sense that they've memorized all 12 notes, like they know exactly what they sound like. And so then, because of just repeated exposure to, our 12-tone system and being able to like hear all those different kinds of notes separated from each other, you kind of develop a little bit of a memory of like what each one sounds like, sort of like how we memorize like words that, for example, or how we know that red is different from blue. You know what I mean? We can sort of develop that sort of ear for it. But not necessarily to the same extent that someone sort of who has perfect pitch might be able to do, right? So it might take people who have what we call pseudo absolute pitch to recall a note. It might take a little bit for them to do that versus a perfect pitch person who kind of had it since they were a kid. They might be able to just do it like a lot quicker because they understand it. It's more like innate. So with that being said, similar to how we learn languages in sort of developmental, in the theory of like developmental studies, right? I don't know the exact name for it, but when a child develops, there's this thing, what we call the critical period. I think it's what it's called, usually between like birth and like age 5-ish, where, your input kind of like is able to stick a lot easier. There's a lot of like very important things that need to be taught at this stage. Otherwise, that it might not manifest itself later in life when it should, right? For example, like language. Mm-hmm. Language is, it's very important, to teach children language within this time period. Otherwise, they may not develop the skills to be able to speak, past that, right? Mm-hmm. Similarly, if a child kind of is exposed to a lot of auditory stimuli, a lot of maybe some training even, you'll see sometimes you'll see videos of like kids who have perfect pitch, like their dad plays a note on the piano and they're able to name it or play like an instrument that has that exact note. They're able to tell it apart from other pitches, like colors, like we can tell red apart from blue. You'll see that there's little kids that are able to do that, and that's because they're at that age where you can kind of train that. But once you go past that, it's a lot more difficult. That's why it's so hard for us to, in a similar way, it's so hard for us as adults to learn languages, it's without like rigorous study, we can't really like pick up a language just like that, like kids can, like very young babies during that critical period. They can pick it up like super super fast. That's the point where like you can train perfect pitch, although it's not like guaranteed, it's not always. But for the most part, if you put a lot of stimulus into the kid's brain, they develop that ear for it. Not so much the ear, but more just the ability to like tell these things apart in the brain. They'll start to develop that, and it just gets harder for adults to learn. So basically, in short, what I'm trying to say is, it's a lot harder for adults, and even then, it's not really close to what, quote unquote, the real thing, right? I hesitate to say that because functionally they're the same, right? If you can memorize all the pitches, you basically have perfect pitch. You know what I mean? At that point, in a practical sense, yeah, but maybe not like from a, I don't know, scientific point of view, right? So yeah, I don't think I had it when I was born, but I will say that my parents were music fans. They weren't musicians necessarily. My dad played a little guitar, but neither of them really had a fully musical background. I will say that they were music lovers. I heard music in the house. I gravitated toward a lot of different music that they listened to, and I would remember even when I was like a kid, I must have been 6 or something. I learned how to use a computer to make my own mixtapes on like a CD back when like you had to burn CDs, right? I made like so many because of like I just liked music. And I liked listening to it in the car, and we always listen to music in the car, So I don't know if that had a lot to do it. I think it did because I just heard a lot of music, and because I loved it so much, I would like try to memorize sort of like how it sounded, and like I would try to pay attention to like that's what the guitar is doing. Even before I played an instrument, I just loved the way it sounded, right? So that I would say probably contributed a little bit to how, or actually maybe not even a little bit. I think that mostly contributed to like why I perceive music in that way, why I might have perfect pitch, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Wow, cool. This is reminding me of another comment that I heard when we were in rehearsal and someone said, Kenan, how the heck do you do it? And do you just like know music? Like, how do you memorize songs? Because everyone in the room tends to look towards you in rehearsals because like we're coming from a different perspective musically, but you tend to just know like on the fly, like, oh, what part are we at, or like what's the form here, or what chord was this one going into this measure, and you're just able to recall that information like at the drop of a hat. And I remember you saying that you can hear songs one time and then you consider it to be memorized. Is that true?
I think that's a very like nice way of putting it. But I will say that, I thank you for that observation. I will say like, it's more that I hear the actual like more like, for example, I can learn a song really quickly because of like pattern recognition. A lot of songs, especially like within the popular music sort of idiom, a lot of them use very similar vocabulary in the way that they structure the chords. Like I've seen these chord progressions before. I've seen that relationship of chords before. And I can kind of trace that pattern in my brain and it kind of just sticks, right? But like, how do I even begin to do that? I kind of, I think of me like when I try to listen to a song to learn it and learn the chords, someone says, hey, I want you to play this song, and then I pick up the chords like right there, right? I'm thinking about I'm using my ear and more so my relative pitch to determine what the chords are, and once I figure out like, oh, here's the key, then I can assign like sort of numbers to each chord, right? Sort of like what you learn in classical theory, or like even just like music theory, where each chord has like, here's the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, 4 chord, 5, 6, 7. I kind of am able to hear like, oh, we're starting on this is the 1 chord, but that jump that we just did to the next one, oh, I noticed that the bass motion it moved up a 5th, so I'm guessing we're on the 5 chord, right? Or like I hear that the relationship between these 2 chords is the 1 to the 5. I hear, or the 2 to the 5 to the 1. It's just like I've seen these patterns before, I've heard this particular move before, and I kind of know when that move happens. Oh, that was this one chord moving to the 4 chord, or and so on, right? So I just take those patterns. I sort of almost like have a database in my brain of like, oh, those are the moves that they do, or here's the progression. And then once I see that there's a pattern, like for example, like a popular song is most often a 4 chord loop in like a section, right? And then I'll play like the chorus. Then I have that chord progression of the chorus already because I noticed that they're just looping these 4 chords, and I'm guessing that, oh, it's probably going to loop on for this long because I've noticed that the pattern is like, oh, maybe they only play this progression 4 times because, music that we consume today, and most people that the music that most people like is sort of like, they always follow the rules of 4, right? Music is in 4/4. You often a verse is like 4 measures or 8 measures or any multiple of 4, right? And so like when you kind of synthesize all these patterns, it becomes like music almost becomes like this canvas that you can kind of just, they're like, all right, here's all my tools, right? I know exactly like what I need to use to be able to get what I want on the canvas. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's really just a combination of all these different like information that I know, the tools that I have, is why I'm able to kind of just like pick up a song like really fast, map it out in my head and be like, okay, this is the form. And then, just be able to like just keep that in my banks, especially if it's a song I like. Yeah. If it's a song I really like that, or a song that I heard so often growing up, like I just know it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like for example, like All Star by Smash Mouth, right? I know it's kind of a meme song, but I grew up watching Shrek. I heard that song all the time, and like I loved that song. And that song is the reason why I know that it's in the key of F sharp or G flat. That's why that song is the reason I know what an F sharp sounds like, the chord progression in that is so ingrained in my brain. The flow of that song, it's just like it exists. I don't even need to look at lead sheet for it. It's just there. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's just like a matter of, having all the tools and putting them all together. Wow.
Yeah. This actually makes me wonder, like, how do you see music in your mind's eye? Like, do you see it as a chart, like a lead sheet, like as everything written on a page? Do you see it as a continuous flow? Like, how does it show up for you as you're experiencing music? And are there any other senses that come with music for you? I know some people, I don't recall what it's called, but like they see color associated with different synesthesia. So how do you make that connection in your mind's eye and ear?
Yeah, sure. So, I kind of wish I had synesthesia, honestly, because people can hear a pitch and they're like, oh, that's red. And it's like, oh, that's cool, and they're able to identify, like, some of them have perfect pitch because they have synesthesia, because they can kind of see, oh, that's that color. So, and that note gives me that color always. Wow. So I know that's, but the way that I see music really is, it's almost like, yeah, you mentioned it, sort of like a flow, right? It's sort of just kind of like moving in my brain. And when I hear sort of like chord changes, it's more just like that moves up a certain amount. I don't really visualize like a concrete image, because I don't know what it is. Maybe I don't think of music in a visual way. Okay. I can memorize charts and stuff, but it kind of doesn't really stick with me in the same way as me sort of feeling it. Okay. I guess in a way the sense that does cross over to my like auditory, sense, is not really sight. It's more like touch or like feel. Like I can, music really kind of makes me move. Music kind of gives me certain feelings. Like I can think of something as like having a rough texture versus like a smooth texture, and so that's really more how I internalize music sensory wise, right? That isn't audio. I think of like certain chords as like feeling a certain way emotionally as well. Like, certain types of major chords give me like a very melancholy vibe. Certain types of minor chords like give me this sort of like, I see like squares sometimes, like shapes. You know, if I was gonna see things visually, I more see shapes and stuff. You know what I mean? Like certain chords give me certain shapes in my brain. Yeah. Some chords have like faces to me. Wow. You know, it's kind of weird, but cool. Yeah. But it's not always. You know, it's more. They're not super consistent. So I know it's not synesthesia. It's more just like the vibes that they give me. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I kind of I can see the vibes give me like the visual. The vibes give me the feeling. And when like chords change, like they sort of make certain motions to me. Like if you go from one chord to another chord, I can feel like it's going up or it's going down. Maybe not in pitch wise, but in terms of its feeling. You know, so I guess that really is kind of how I would like visualize it. You know, yeah. If I were to put put some words to that, I've never really given it much thought, but I guess that is sort of like how I would interpret the music, like sensory wise, based on, you know, that is an audio, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. That makes sense. And thank you for like explaining that and working through that, because I think a lot of people get very curious about perfect pitch. I think people have their own ways of like explaining it to others, and it's hard to understand for someone who doesn't have it. It's like, what is that person experiencing? And so I think there are a lot of misconceptions around it in general, just because it's like, oh my gosh, you have perfect pitch. Like I think a lot of people think immediately that means that you're just a prodigy. And honestly, that's what comes to mind. But like, what would you say are the biggest misconceptions socially? And what are the reactions when you say, or do you choose not to share it because of the reaction that you might get? I heard a lot of these types of comments. There's a lot of, I don't know, in classes where people had perfect pitch. It's like, no, they have perfect pitch. And then they develop a certain like mindset around what that person's capabilities are without even really understanding what their capabilities are, which is why I'm so intrigued by everything you're sharing today. And I want it to be public. I want people to know what it's like, and to be able to send this out and say, this is actually someone that has it talking about it. So with that being said, like, what is your reaction to that? And what would you say are the common misconceptions and perceptions of it?
Yeah, sure. So some common misconceptions, I feel like when people think about perfect pitch, is that like it's the same for everybody. That's like the first thing that sort of comes to mind. And, you know, I will say that my perfect pitch is sort of like not as developed as some other people, because I still take a little bit of time to sort of discern between some stuff. Like I can tell what certain notes are. Some notes come easier to me than others. So it's still something that you have to kind of really train. Like everybody is sort of born with the ability to, you know, detect language or to hear language, but you know, you still have to train the ability to discern what those words mean. Yeah. You know, I'm always using this like analogy of like music to language because they're so similar, right? So that's like one misconception is that like people think that it's the same for everybody. I know that like there's videos out there of like people who have trained their perfect pitch and it's like so instant. They can hear a chord. It's like this guy plays like random notes on a piano, and this other guy who was like listening to it is naming every single note from bottom to top. It would take me a while to do that. I think I could do it, but it's just like I haven't trained the ability to just kind of like do it as instant. So in a way you could say that my perfect pitch is not as fluent, right? Okay. If we're using that language sort of analogy. But I can sort of get by, you know what I mean? I can communicate, right? Yes. You know what I mean? So it's not the same for everybody, you know? I guess one sort of like thing that people tend to, like sort of knee-jerk reaction people tend to have to hearing that somebody has perfect pitch, you know, is like they sort of, there's a couple of things to it. So, or no, like let's assume that I like a layman. I don't know if I'm saying like someone who's not into music, mm-hmm. right? Someone who doesn't really do music approaches you, and they're like maybe they just saw a video of what's his name? Why can't I not think of his name? Not Sam Smith. The Charlie Puth. Oh, Charlie. Yeah. Why was I thinking?
He has perfect pitch,
Yeah, exactly. So they see on TikTok like the video, or like maybe I don't know, his appearances on Jimmy Fallon or whatever. You see a video of like Charlie Puth getting tested on like his perfect pitch, and so their instant reaction a lot of that time is like when someone finds out. This has happened to me before. Someone finds out I have perfect pitch. They're like, "Oh yeah, you have perfect pitch. That's so cool. What note is this?" And they'll do like, yeah, they'll test you like on the spot, and they'll like hit like a water bottle or something. It's like, what are you doing?
They're like, what's my
Yeah, exactly. That exact,
Excuse me?
yeah, that exact interaction with the clap that has happened to me before, and I'm like,
Really?
yes, and I was just like, I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
Oh man.
there's a lot of notes there if you want to
Yeah.
be specific about it, but
Wow. Interesting.
you know, that's just one. I got a couple down, yeah. So more often than not, especially if you're talking to like this person that you know they don't really know much about music, you could, because they don't know much about music, anything you say doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like you could give them a totally wrong note, but they wouldn't know.
True.
You know what I mean? You could say J sharp and they'd be like, "Oh, that's awesome."
That's a J sharp. You're like, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, why are you asking me this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I appreciate their intention. It's like, I know that they think it's cool. But that's just one sort of like cultural thing that people kind of get into, and that's more on the positive side, I will say, because they you know, it's earnest.
Yeah.
They're really just trying to like be, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there is sort of the other side of that where some people are a little bit they have more of a negative opinion of it for whatever reason, for one reason or another. It oftentimes that could be misconstrued as you saying that you have perfect pitch. It could be misconstrued as you trying to brag, trying to show up somebody, or trying to just put yourself above another person. And that's, you know, more often than not, that's not your intention. You know, you just, someone asked and you just said it. You know, why would you lie about it?
Answered the question.
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of, I wouldn't call it a stigma, but there is sort of like that opinion that kind of hangs around some people, especially other musicians. It's usually other musicians who tend to do this, not so much regular people, because regular people like find it cool. You know what I mean? But other musicians tend to have this like opinion of it that's like, oh man, that's cheating or whatever, or it's like it's other stuff like that doesn't really make any sense. You know what I mean? Oftentimes they'll just kind of, you know, look at you funny for it, and they're like, this guy's a show off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you know, I've seen that happen to some people, but I've never gotten that just because of that sort of negativity towards it. I never really like come out the gate like, hey guys, what's up? I have perfect pitch. Test me. You know, it's like, I mean, like, come on, you know? I've never done that. And it's only when like people sort of like come up to me and like, and they kind of put the pieces together. They're like, oh, you played that like instantly. Do you have a perfect pitch? And then that's when I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Answer the question.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm not trying to like, I know that I can do it, so I'll just do it, you know, but I'm not going to walk around and tell everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I guess that's goes for any other character trait. Like say you're like, you know, naturally, I don't know, gifted at a particular thing, right? You don't go around walking around and say, hey, I'm a gifted kid. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's kind of like, I didn't ask. So that's kind of, you know, I get that from a normal human being kind of perspective of like, this is how you operate in society. Yeah. But from like another, you know, the negativity is a little unwarranted. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think that just comes from like, you know, the humans are naturally like jealous people. Humans always want what they don't have. You know what I mean? So one way that manifests, you know, in people is by bringing other people down to lift yourself up. You know what I mean? And that's just like that's just a symptom of pride in people. And, you know, there's nothing you can do about that. That's not even just a really musician thing. That's a human thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's a whole rabbit hole, but, you know, that's sort of the negative side of it, I would say. But yeah, that hopefully that answers like sort of your question of like what are the sort of stereotypes around it. It's like that, like this, like perfect pitch people are like mean or whatever, or they're stuck up or whatever. And it's like, we're just like anybody else. We just have this particular ability, but that's it. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't say that to somebody who had like say you were in middle school and like your friend has like a college reading level. You don't like, so what? You know what I mean? Definitely. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. And I do think, like you're saying, like maybe these opinions are developed by the people like that are jealous or that are like, wow, they genuinely probably just appreciate that for what it is, and it's just coming out in the wrong way and being manifested in a way that's like that creates these types of stereotypes. Because I think non-musicians that hear like perfect pitch, it's like they either don't know what it is or they probably assume the worst because of these things that have been created by people who don't know enough about it, like what you shared with us today. So thank you so much, Kenan, for being here and for sharing your experiences with it and what it's like, because I know I learned a lot. Although I'm a singer, I I don't have perfect pitch, and I've always tried to develop like better relative pitch in my work. Like I remember a voice teacher that encouraged me to sing while I play piano. Like sing this while you play it, sing it while you play it, like go up the piano and develop that like connection to the notes, because you can like see what note it is once you memorize the pitches on the keyboard, and then you can like recall that vocally. So I think everyone has their own way of improving their musicianship, and it's so interesting to hear all of this from you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, cool.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's a wrap.